The desert wind carried dust and death across the Arizona Territory in 1885. Sarah Mitchell pressed her back against the rocky outcrop, her breath coming in short gasps. The wagon train she had been traveling with lay in ruins behind her, smoke still rising from the burned canvas covers. Bodies of fellow travelers scattered across the desert floor told the story of another Apache raid. Her husband James had pushed her behind the rocks when the first war cries echoed across the canyon. "Stay hidden," he had whispered, pressing his rifle into her hands. That was 3 hours ago. Now the silence was more terrifying than the screaming had been. Sarah's dress was torn from scrambling over the sharp rocks. Her hands shook as she gripped the rifle, knowing she had only 2 bullets left. The sun beat down mercilessly and her water was long gone. She could hear them moving through the wreckage below, finishing what they had started. A shadow fell across her hiding place. She looked up to see a lone Apache warrior standing on the ridge above her. Unlike the others who had attacked the wagon train, this one wore no war paint. His dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. He was younger than she expected, maybe 25, with strong shoulders and scars across his chest that spoke of many battles. Sarah raised the rifle with trembling hands, but something in his expression stopped her from pulling the trigger. He wasn't looking at her with the savage hunger she had expected. Instead, there was something almost curious in his gaze. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the dust and fear. "Just kill me. Don't let them take me alive." The warrior tilted his head, studying her face. He had heard the stories of what happened to white women captured by his people, just as she had heard the stories of what white soldiers did to Apache women and children. The cycle of revenge had been spinning for decades across this brutal landscape. He jumped down from the ridge, landing silently on the sand beside her hiding place. Sarah pressed herself further back against the rock, the rifle still aimed at his chest, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the weapon steady. The Apache warrior said something in his native tongue, his voice low and calm. When she didn't respond, he switched to broken English. "Gun, no good. Hands shake. Miss." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She had never killed anyone before, had never even held a gun until James taught her 3 months ago when they decided to make the journey west to California. Now her husband was probably dead, and she was alone with this man who could end her life with a single motion. The warrior reached out slowly, his fingers closing over the barrel of the rifle. Sarah expected him to tear it away from her, but instead he gently pushed it aside. "No need," he said in his halting English. "I am Ayanna, lone wolf." "Not with others." Sarah stared at him in confusion. "You're not... You didn't attack us?" Ayanna shook his head, gesturing toward the ruined wagon train. "Chiricahua Apache. My enemies, too. They kill my family, burn my village. I hunt them." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. This warrior wasn't one of her attackers. He was tracking them just as lost and seeking revenge as she was. His family had been murdered too, his home destroyed by the same band of renegades who had slaughtered her wagon train. "Your husband?" Ayanna asked, his dark eyes scanning her face. Sarah's voice broke. "Dead, they're all dead." Ayanna nodded grimly. He had seen the bodies, counted the dead. The Chiricahua war party that had done this was led by a renegade named Nalnish, a man who had gone mad with grief after losing his own wife and children to white soldiers. Now Nalnish killed without discrimination, attacking Apache and white settlements alike. The sun was beginning to set, painting the desert in shades of red and orange that reminded Sarah of blood. She could hear the war party moving away in the distance, their voices growing fainter as they headed toward the mountains with their stolen horses and goods. "Water," Ayanna said, offering her a leather pouch from his belt. "Drink." Sarah hesitated, then accepted the water gratefully. It was warm but clean, and she drank deeply before handing it back. "Why are you helping me?" Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "White soldiers kill Apache women, Apache warriors kill white women. Always same story, always more death." He looked at her directly. "I am tired of death." Sarah studied his face in the fading light. There was a weariness in his expression that went beyond physical exhaustion. This man had seen too much violence, lost too much to the endless cycle of revenge that consumed both their peoples. "The Chiricahua will return," Ayanna said, checking the weapons on his belt. "This place, not safe for woman alone." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert evening. "Where can I go?" Everyone I knew is dead. I have no family, no home. Ayana considered this, his weathered hands tracing patterns in the sand. He was thinking of his sister, taken by white soldiers 2 summers ago. He had never found her body, never knew if she died quickly or suffered. Looking at this white woman, he saw the same fear and desperation his sister must have felt. Fort Apache, he said finally. 3 days' walk. Soldiers there. They protect you. Sarah's heart sank. 3 days through Apache territory with no food, little water, and hostile warriors potentially tracking her. She would never make it alone. I'll die out there. Ayana stood, his tall frame silhouetted against the darkening sky. For a moment, Sarah thought he was going to walk away and leave her to her fate. Instead, he extended his hand toward her. Come, I take you to Fort. Sarah stared at his outstretched hand in disbelief. You would do that? Risk your life to help me? Ayana's expression was unreadable. My sister. Looked like you, same hair, same scared eyes. I could not save her. Maybe I save you. The weight of his words settled over Sarah like a blanket. This man was offering to guide her to safety, knowing that if other Apache warriors found him helping a white woman, they would kill him as a traitor. He was risking everything for a stranger, driven by the memory of a sister he couldn't save. Sarah reached out and took his hand, feeling the calloused strength in his fingers as he helped her to her feet. Thank you, she whispered. As they prepared to leave the rocky shelter that had protected her through the day, Sarah had no idea that this decision would change both their lives forever. She couldn't know about the secret burned into her own flesh hidden beneath her torn dress. She couldn't know that Ayana would discover it, or that it would reveal a connection between them that went far deeper than chance. All she knew was that in this moment, surrounded by death and destruction, she had found an unlikely ally. The desert stretched out before them, vast and dangerous, but no longer quite so empty. They walked through the night in silence, Ayana leading the way with the sure steps of someone who knew every rock and cactus in this harsh land. Sarah stumbled frequently, her soft leather boots no match for the rocky terrain. Each time she fell, Ayana would pause and wait patiently while she struggled back to her feet. The moon was high when they finally stopped to rest in a small canyon sheltered by towering red rocks. Sarah collapsed against a boulder, her feet bloody and her dress torn in a dozen new places. She had never been so tired in her entire life. Sleep, Ayana said, settling down across from her with his rifle across his knees. I watch. Sarah wanted to protest, to tell him he needed rest too, but exhaustion won out. She curled up on the hard ground, using her torn shawl as a pillow. Despite her fear and grief, sleep came quickly. She woke to the sound of voices speaking in rapid Apache. Sarah's eyes snapped open to find 3 warriors standing at the mouth of their small canyon. Ayana was on his feet, his hand resting on his knife handle as he spoke with them in their native language. The conversation grew heated. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but she could see the anger in their gestures, the way they pointed at her and then back at Ayana. These were not the same Apache who had attacked her wagon train, but they were clearly not happy to find their fellow warrior with a white captive. The tallest of the 3 warriors, an older man with gray streaking his black hair, stepped closer to Ayana. He spoke in English, his words directed at Sarah, but his eyes never leaving Ayana's face. White woman. Why my nephew protects enemy? Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Nephew? She looked between Ayana and the older warrior, seeing the family resemblance now in their strong jawlines and dark eyes. Ayana's response was quiet but firm. She is not enemy, uncle. She is alone, no family. Shirakawa killed her people, same as they killed mine. The older warrior, who Sarah realized must be some kind of chief or elder, circled around her slowly. His gaze was calculating, dangerous. White soldiers kill your sister. White settlers take our land. This woman is white. She pays for crimes of her people. No, Ayana said, stepping between his uncle and Sarah. Enough blood. Enough killing. It solves nothing. The 3rd warrior, younger than the others, laughed bitterly. You sound like old women in council, talking of peace while our children starve on reservation. Sarah could feel the tension building between the men. She understood enough to know that Ayana was risking his relationship with his own family to protect her. The guilt of it made her stomach turn. Please, she said, struggling to her feet. Don't fight because of me. I'll go alone. I won't cause trouble for your nephew. The elder warrior studied her for a long moment. You speak bravely for captive woman. What is your name? Sarah Mitchell. And why should Apache warrior risk his life for Sarah Mitchell? What makes you worth protecting? Sarah's mind raced. What could she say that would make sense to these men? That she was just another settler heading west with dreams of a new life? That she had never harmed an Apache in her life? None of that would matter to warriors who had seen their people slaughtered and driven from their ancestral lands. I don't know, she said honestly. I can't give you a good reason. I'm nobody special, just a woman who lost everything and doesn't want to die alone in the desert. The older warrior seemed surprised by her honesty. He exchanged a long look with Ayanna, then said something in Apache that Sarah couldn't understand. The younger warrior protested angrily, but the elder raised his hand for silence. I am Goyakla, the elder said to Sarah. In English, you call me Geronimo. This woman, he gestured to her, travels with my nephew to Fort Apache. But first she proves she is not spy. Sarah's blood ran cold. I'm not a spy. I don't know anything about military plans or— Quiet, Geronimo commanded. Remove dress. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. What? Uncle, no, Ayanna said sharply, but Geronimo held up a hand. White soldiers sometimes send women to spy on Apache camps. They carry messages, maps hidden in clothes. If this woman is innocent, she has nothing to hide. Sarah's hands flew to the torn neckline of her dress. I won't. I can't. The young warrior stepped forward with a cruel smile. Then she is spy. We kill her now. Wait, Ayanna said, his voice tight with tension. Give her privacy. I will check her clothing for hidden items. You have my word. Geronimo considered this, then nodded slowly. Very well. But nephew, if you lie to protect this woman, you are no longer Apache in my eyes. The weight of that threat hung heavy in the desert air. Sarah realized that Ayanna wasn't just risking his life for her. He was risking his identity, his place in the only family he had left. The three warriors withdrew to the mouth of the canyon, giving them a small measure of privacy. Sarah turned to face the rock wall, her hands shaking as she began to unfasten her dress. I'm sorry, she whispered to Ayanna. I never wanted to cause problems between you and your family. Not your fault, Ayanna replied quietly. My uncle. He has good reasons for not trusting whites, but hatred makes men blind to other possibilities. Sarah's dress pooled around her feet, leaving her in only her thin cotton chemise. The desert air was cold against her skin, raising goosebumps along her arms. She heard Ayanna moving behind her, checking the pockets and seams of her dress for hidden compartments. Nothing, he called out to his uncle in English. No papers, no maps, no— His words cut off abruptly. Sarah heard him draw in a sharp breath, felt his presence very close behind her. What is it? She asked, not daring to turn around. For a long moment, Ayanna said nothing. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, The mark on your back. Where did you get it? Sarah's heart stopped. She had forgotten about the brand, the scar that had been burned into her flesh 15 years ago when she was just a child. It was positioned between her shoulder blades, usually hidden by her clothing. She had trained herself not to think about it, to pretend it didn't exist. It's nothing, she said quickly. Just an old scar. This is not scar from accident, Ayanna said, his voice strange and tight. This is deliberate mark, symbol. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. She had never told anyone about the symbol, about what it meant or how she had gotten it. It was her deepest, darkest secret. Please, she whispered. Just let me put my dress back on. Your uncle is waiting. But Ayanna didn't move away. She could hear him breathing heavily behind her, could feel his tension like a living thing. This symbol, he said slowly, it is Apache, very old Apache. It means protected by the spirits. Sarah's knees went weak. That's impossible. I'm not Apache. I'm white. I was born in Kansas to English parents. Then how do you have sacred mark burned into your flesh? Ayanna's voice was rough with emotion. Only Apache medicine men know how to make this symbol. Only given to children blessed by the spirits. The canyon seemed to spin around Sarah. This couldn't be happening. The brand was supposed to be her shame, her secret burden. It wasn't supposed to mean anything to anyone else. I don't know, she said desperately. I don't remember how I got it. I've had it since I was small. She heard Ayanna move closer, felt his fingertips hover just above the raised scar tissue without quite touching it. Uncle, he called out suddenly. Come here now. Sarah grabbed for her dress, pulling it up to cover herself as the three Apache warriors rushed back into the canyon. Geronimo took one look at Ayana's face and barked a question in Apache. Ayana responded rapidly in their native language, gesturing toward Sarah's back. The effect on the warriors was immediate and dramatic. The younger warrior stepped back as if he had been struck. Geronimo's eyes widened and he said something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. "Show me," Geronimo commanded Sarah. His entire demeanor changed. "I don't understand what's happening," Sarah said, clutching her dress to her chest. "The symbol, woman. Show me the symbol on your back." With trembling hands, Sarah lowered her dress enough to expose her shoulder blades. She heard all three warriors draw in sharp breaths. Geronimo stepped forward and spoke a single word in Apache that seemed to hang in the air like smoke. "What does it mean?" Sarah asked desperately. "Please, somebody tell me what this means." Geronimo's weathered face was pale as he stared at the mark on her back. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with disbelief and something that might have been hope. "It means, white woman with yellow hair and blue eyes, that you are not who you think you are." The desert sun was climbing higher, but Sarah felt cold as ice. She sat on a flat rock while the three Apache warriors spoke in hushed tones several feet away. Their eyes kept darting back to her, filled with something between wonder and fear. Ayana finally approached her, his expression unreadable. "My uncle wants to know about your earliest memories. Before you lived with white family." "I told you I was born to English parents in Kansas," Sarah said, but even as she spoke the words, doubt crept into her voice. "At least, that's what they told me." "Think harder," Ayana pressed gently. "Do you remember anything from when you were very small? Different faces? Different voices?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to reach back into the foggy memories of early childhood. She had always accepted the story her parents told her, that she was their daughter, born during a difficult winter when the doctor couldn't reach their isolated homestead. But now, searching deeper, she found strange gaps in her memory. "There was a woman," she said slowly, images flickering in her mind like shadows. "Dark hair, kind eyes. She used to sing to me in a language I didn't understand. But my mother, the woman who raised me, said it was just a hired girl who helped with the house." The three warriors exchanged meaningful looks. Geronimo stepped closer, his weathered face intense with concentration. "This woman who sang, did she have scars on her hands here?" He traced lines across his own palms. Sarah's breath caught. "Yes, I remember asking about them once. She said they were from working with thorns, making baskets." She paused, another memory surfacing. "She called me something else. Not Sarah, it sounded like Ayana, but different." "Ayana is male name," the older warrior said. "Female would be Ayana, little eternal blossom." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Deep in her chest, something stirred in recognition. "Ayana," she whispered, and it felt like coming home. Geronimo knelt in the sand before her, his dark eyes searching her face with new intensity. 15 summers ago, soldiers attacked Apache camp near Dragoon Mountains. Many killed, some taken. Among taken was Medicine Man's daughter, child with pale hair and blue eyes. Very rare among our people, very sacred. Sarah's hands began to shake. "You think I'm that child?" Medicine Man gave his daughter sacred mark before soldiers came. Mark to protect her, to help spirits find her if she was lost. Geronimo's voice was heavy with emotion. Child was 5 summers old. Had white hair like winter sky, blue eyes like deep water. "But I'm not Apache," Sarah protested, even as her certainty crumbled. "I don't speak your language, I don't know your customs." "Child was taken very young," Ayana said gently. "White families who raise stolen Indian children, they make them forget, make them think they are white. It is safer that way." The young warrior who had been silent until now stepped forward. "If she is Ayana, daughter of Nalnish, then she is—" He spoke rapidly in Apache, his voice filled with excitement. "What is he saying?" Sarah demanded. Geronimo's expression grew grave. "He says if you are Medicine Man's daughter, then you are sister to War Chief who leads raids against white settlements. Nalnish, who killed your wagon train. He is your blood brother." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah grabbed the rock beneath her to keep from falling. "The man who murdered my husband? Who killed all those people?" "Nalnish went mad with grief when soldiers took his sister," Ayana explained. "For 15 years he has been killing whites in revenge. He does not know his sister lives." Sarah struggled to process this information. The savage war chief who had destroyed her life might be her own brother. The man she had been taught to fear and hate could be family. "This is insane," she whispered. "I can't be Apache. Look at me, I'm white. I burn in the sun, I don't know how to survive in the desert, I can't even shoot a rifle properly." "Skin color means nothing," Geronimo said firmly. "Apache is not about blood alone. It is about spirit, about connection to the land and the ancestors. The mark on your back proves the spirits claimed you as one of ours." He stood and walked to his horse, returning with a leather pouch. From inside, he pulled out a small object wrapped in soft deerskin. "This belonged to Medicine Man's daughter. He gave it to me before he died. Made me promise to return it if his children were ever found." With reverent care, Geronimo unwrapped the object. It was a necklace made of silver and turquoise, clearly very old and very sacred. The moment Sarah saw it, another flood of memories crashed over her. She remembered small hands reaching for the bright blue stones, remembered a deep voice telling her the necklace would protect her always, remembered the weight of it around her neck as she played in the dust outside a wickiup. "I wore that," she breathed. "When I was small before everything changed." Geronimo held out the necklace. "Then you are truly Ayana, daughter of Nalnish the Medicine Man, sister of Nalnish the War Chief." Sarah reached out with trembling fingers, but stopped just short of touching the necklace. "What does this mean? What happens now?" "Now," Geronimo said, "you must choose. Continue to Fort Apache, live as white woman named Sarah Mitchell, or come with us to find your brother. Help us stop the killing before more innocents die." "Stop the killing?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Your nephew said Nalnish has gone mad. How could I possibly stop him?" "Apache law is very clear," the young warrior said. "Family has right to challenge war chief who acts without honor. Sister can demand brother lay down weapons, return to path of wisdom. And if he refuses, the warriors exchange dark looks. Then sister has right to kill brother who has brought shame to family name," Geronimo said quietly. Sarah stared at him in horror. "You want me to murder my own brother?" "We want you to save him," Ayana said, his voice gentle but firm. "Nalnish was good man once, kind brother, wise leader. Grief and anger have poisoned his spirit. Maybe seeing his lost sister alive will bring him back to himself. And if it doesn't?" Ayana was quiet for a long moment. "Then you will have to choose between your Apache family and the innocent people he continues to kill." Sarah looked down at the necklace in Geronimo's hands. Such a small thing to carry such enormous weight. If she took it, she would be accepting a heritage she had never known she possessed. She would be taking responsibility for crimes she had never committed, for a brother she couldn't remember. But if she didn't take it, if she continued to Fort Apache as planned, how many more wagon trains would be attacked? How many more families would be destroyed by a madman's grief? "Where is he now?" she asked finally. 3 days' ride north," the young warrior replied. "His band camps in the Chiricahua Mountains in caves that soldiers cannot reach." Sarah thought of her husband James, lying dead in the desert sand. She thought of the other families on the wagon train, the children, the elderly, all killed for the crime of being white in Apache territory. Then she thought of a 5-year-old girl being torn away from everything she knew, forced to forget her real family and live as someone else entirely. Everyone in this story was a victim. Everyone had lost something precious. The question was whether the cycle of violence could ever be broken, or if it would continue until everyone was dead. "If I go with you," Sarah said slowly, "and if I can somehow reach my brother." "What guarantee do I have that you won't kill me once I'm no longer useful?" Geronimo smiled grimly. "Same guarantee we have that you will not lead soldiers to our camp once you know where it is. We must trust each other or we all die separately." Sarah looked at each man in turn, Geronimo with his weathered wisdom, the young warrior with his burning desire for justice, and Ayana with his quiet strength and surprising gentleness. These were men who had every reason to hate her, yet they were offering her a chance to reclaim a lost identity and perhaps save lives in the process. She thought of the woman who had sung to her in Apache, whose scarred hands had been gentle as they braided her white hair. Had that been her real mother? Had she died in the same raid that scattered their family to the winds? Slowly, Sarah reached out and took the necklace from Geronimo's hands. The silver was warm from the sun, the turquoise smooth as water. As she lifted it over her head and settled it around her neck, she felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition, a homecoming she had never expected. "My name is Ayana," she said, testing the words on her tongue. And I want to find my brother. The three Apache warriors nodded solemnly. They had come to this canyon expecting to find their nephew traveling with an enemy captive. Instead, they had found something much more complicated and much more dangerous. As they prepared to leave the sheltered canyon and head north into the mountains, Sarah, Ayanna, touched the turquoise stones at her throat and wondered what other secrets lay buried in her forgotten past. Would her brother recognize her after 15 years? Would she be able to reach the man he had been before grief drove him mad? Or would she be walking into the Chiricahua Mountains to face her own death at the hands of the brother she had never known she had? The journey into the Chiricahua Mountains took 2 days of hard riding across terrain that would have killed Sarah if she had attempted it alone. Now mounted on a sturdy Apache pony and wearing clothes more suitable for the desert, she began to feel something awakening in her blood, an instinct for reading the landscape, for finding water in seemingly barren places, for moving silently through brush that would have betrayed a white traveler. Your Apache self remembers, Ayanna observed as they paused to rest the horses in the shade of a towering rock formation. Body knows what mind forgot. Sarah, she was trying to think of herself as Ayanna now, nodded slowly. It's strange. Sometimes I know which way to go before anyone tells me. Like part of me has been here before. You have, Geronimo said from where he sat studying the trail ahead. This was your father's territory. You played in these mountains as child? As they climbed higher into the peaks, more memories began to surface. A waterfall hidden behind a curtain of vines where she had learned to swim. A cave filled with ancient paintings where her father had told her stories of the first Apache. A meadow where she had gathered herbs with her mother. Her real mother, not the white woman who had raised her. The memories came in fragments, pieces of a life she had been forced to forget. Each one was painful and beautiful at the same time, like pressing on a healing wound. On the evening of the second day, they finally reached the camp. It was hidden in a natural fortress of rock walls and narrow passages that would be nearly impossible for cavalry to assault. Smoke from cooking fires drifted up from the sheltered canyon floor, and Ayanna could see the dark shapes of wickiups scattered among the boulders. Remember, Geronimo warned as they began the descent. You are here as my guest, under my protection. But if fighting starts, I cannot guarantee your safety. Ayanna nodded, her hand instinctively moving to touch the turquoise necklace beneath her shirt. She had changed into Apache clothing, a doe-skin dress decorated with beadwork, high moccasins that protected her legs from thorns and rocks. But she still felt like she was wearing a costume, playing a role she didn't understand. The camp came alive with activity as their small party approached. Warriors emerged from the shadows with weapons ready. Women called out warnings. Children scattered to safety behind rocks and trees. These people had been living as fugitives for so long that visitors meant potential danger. But when they recognized Geronimo, the tension eased slightly. The famous war leader was respected even by those who didn't follow him directly. Warriors lowered their rifles, though they kept suspicious eyes on the pale-skinned woman riding with their visitors. Where is Nalnish? Geronimo called out in Apache. An older woman pointed toward a large wickiup set apart from the others. He speaks with the War Council. They plan another raid on the stagecoach route. Ayanna's heart sank. More innocent people would die if they couldn't reach her brother in time. They dismounted and made their way through the camp. Ayanna was conscious of the stares following her every step. Some of the expressions were curious, others hostile. A few of the older women looked at her with something that might have been recognition, but none spoke to her directly. Outside the council wickiup, Geronimo paused. You must be strong now, niece. Your brother has changed much since you were children. The man you meet may not be the boy you remember. I don't remember him at all, Ayanna admitted. What if he doesn't recognize me? What if he thinks this is some kind of trick? Then we will all die, the young warrior said bluntly, earning him a sharp look from both Geronimo and Ayanna. They could hear voices inside the wickiup, men speaking passionately about targets and tactics. Geronimo called out a greeting in Apache, and the conversation inside stopped abruptly. Come, came the reply in a voice that made Ayanna's skin crawl with an inexplicable combination of fear and longing. They pushed aside the hide flap covering the entrance and stepped into the smoky interior. 5 men sat in a circle around a small fire, weapons at their sides, war paint streaking their faces. At the far side of the circle, directly across from the entrance, sat a man who could only be Nalnish. Ayana's breath caught in her throat. Even after 15 years of violence and grief, she could see traces of the brother she had lost. He had the same strong jaw as their father, the same intense dark eyes. But those eyes were cold now, empty of everything except rage. Nalnish looked first at Geronimo, then at Ayana and the young warrior. When his gaze finally settled on Ayana, his expression didn't change. No recognition flickered in his face, no hint that he saw anything familiar in her features. "You bring white woman to war council, old man?" Nalnish's voice was harsh, speaking in English for her benefit. "Have you grown so old that you cannot tell enemy from friend?" "Look closer, nephew," Geronimo replied calmly. "Look with eyes of memory, not hatred." Nalnish rose to his feet, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. He was taller than Ayana had expected, with the lean, dangerous grace of a predator. Scars covered his arms and chest, telling the story of countless battles. "I look and see white skin, yellow hair, blue eyes of the people who murdered my family," he said, taking a step toward her. "You insult my grief by bringing her here." "Your family was not murdered," Geronimo said quietly. "Your sister stands before you now." The effect of those words was immediate and dramatic. Nalnish froze as if he had been struck by lightning. The other warriors in the circle shifted nervously, hands moving to weapons. The air in the wickiup grew thick with tension. "Impossible," Nalnish whispered, but his voice had lost its certainty. Geronimo nodded to Ayana. The celebration that night was unlike anything Ayana had ever experienced. The entire camp came alive with drumming, singing, and dancing around a great fire that sent sparks spiraling up into the star-filled sky. Children who had been hiding earlier now ran freely between the adults, their faces painted with joy and excitement. But beneath the festivities, Ayana could feel the tension. Not everyone was convinced she was truly Nalnish's lost sister. She caught whispered conversations stopping when she walked by, saw suspicious glances from warriors who had fought beside her brother for years. "They don't trust me," she confided to Ayana as they sat together on the edge of the celebration. "Can you blame them?" he replied quietly. "You look like their enemy, speak like their enemy. For many here, all whites are the same. Killers who took their children destroyed their homes." Ayana touched the turquoise necklace at her throat. "Am I fooling myself? Maybe I'm not really Apache. Maybe I'm just a white woman with a stolen necklace and false memories." Ayana studied her face in the firelight. "When you spoke Apache in the council tonight, where did those words come from?" "I don't know. They just appeared in my mind. And when you found water yesterday without being shown where to look," Ayana frowned, remembering. She had been thirsty and had simply walked to a cluster of rocks, knowing somehow that there would be a spring hidden beneath them. Instinct, I guess. "Apache instinct," Ayana said firmly. "Blood calls to blood. Land calls to its children. You are who you believe yourself to be." Their conversation was interrupted by one of Nalnish's warriors, a scarred man named Cochise, who served as the war chief's second in command. He approached them with obvious reluctance, his hand resting on his knife handle. "The chief wants to see his sister," Cochise said, the pause before the last word making his skepticism clear. Ayana followed him through the camp to a small wickiup set apart from the others. Inside, she found Nalnish sitting alone, staring into a small fire. The joy she had seen in his face earlier was gone, replaced by the familiar hardness that had sustained him through 15 years of warfare. "Sit," he said without looking up. "We need to talk." Ayana settled across the fire from him, studying her brother's profile. Even in the gentle firelight, she could see the toll that years of violence had taken on him. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, a tension in his shoulders that never seemed to relax. "Do you know how many people I have killed in your name?" he asked suddenly. Ayana's stomach clenched. "No, 47. I counted each one. Soldiers, settlers, cowboys, stage drivers, men, women, children. I told myself each death brought me closer to justice for what was done to our family. Brother, I cut the throat of a white woman who reminded me of you," Nalnish continued, his voice flat and emotionless. "She had yellow hair, blue eyes. She begged for her life in broken Apache. Said she had always been kind to Indian people. I killed her anyway because her kindness couldn't bring back my dead sister." Ayana felt sick. "I'm not dead. I never was, but I thought you were. For 15 years, I lived with that grief, let it poison everything inside me. Now you sit here alive and well, and I have to face the truth that all those deaths were for nothing." He finally looked at her, and she saw the deep pain in his eyes. This wasn't just about grief anymore, it was about guilt, about the horrible realization that his quest for revenge had been built on a lie. "The deaths weren't for nothing if they stopped now," Ayanna said carefully. "You can't change what's already happened, but you can choose what happens next." Nalnish laughed bitterly. "You think it's that simple? That I can just tell my warriors to forget 15 years of war? That the families of the dead will forgive and move on? I think you have to try. The alternative is continuing to kill until everyone is dead." "Maybe that would be better," Nalnish said quietly. "Maybe we should all just die and let the white man have this land. We're beaten, sister. The reservations are death camps, the old ways are forgotten. What's the point of surviving if we can't live as Apache?" Ayanna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. This was worse than rage, this was despair. The kind of hopelessness that led men to destroy everything rather than admit defeat. "Our parents didn't die so you could give up," she said firmly. "They died believing their children would carry on the Apache spirit. That spirit isn't about war or killing. It's about survival, about adapting, about finding ways to honor the old wisdom in a new world." Pretty words from someone who spent 15 years living in comfort while her people suffered. The accusation hit Ayanna like a slap. "You think those years were comfortable? You think being forced to forget everything I was, everything I came from, was easy? I may not have been fighting your war, brother, but I was fighting my own battle to survive." Nalnish looked surprised by the anger in her voice. "Tell me," he said after a moment. "Tell me what your life was like with the whites." Ayanna stared into the fire, gathering her thoughts. She had never told anyone the full truth about her childhood with the Mitchell family. "They weren't cruel people," she began slowly. "James and Mary Mitchell. They couldn't have children of their own, and when the soldiers brought me to them, they saw it as a gift from God. They named me Sarah and raised me as their daughter. But they were terrified that someone would discover I wasn't really their child. They burned my Apache clothes, forbade me from speaking anything but English, punished me whenever I showed any sign of remembering my real family. They thought they were protecting me, but they were slowly killing the Apache part of my soul." She touched the small wooden horse in her pouch. "I kept having dreams about this desert, about people with dark skin and kind eyes. Mary Mitchell would find me crying in the morning and tell me they were just nightmares. She made me drink medicine that gave me headaches and made the dreams go away." Nalnish's expression had grown increasingly dark as she spoke. "They drugged you to make you forget? They thought it was kindness. In their minds, being Apache was a curse, something to be cured. They honestly believed they were saving me from a life of savagery. And you believed them?" Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. "Part of me did. I learned to hate the Apache part of myself because I was taught it was something shameful. I became Sarah Mitchell and tried to forget that Ayanna had ever existed. But you never fully succeeded?" "No. There was always something missing, something that didn't fit. I felt like I was wearing someone else's skin." She looked at her brother directly. "When James proposed marriage, I said yes because I thought it might make me feel more real, more like the person everyone expected me to be. But on our wedding day, I stood at the altar and felt like I was betraying someone I couldn't even remember." Nalnish was studying her face intently. "Do you hate them? The whites who stole your life?" "I hate what they did. I hate the system that made it possible. But the individual," Ayanna shrugged. "Mary Mitchell loved me in her own way. She was just doing what her culture told her was right. Hating her wouldn't bring back the years I lost. You're more forgiving than I am. Maybe I have to be. If I let hatred consume me the way it's consumed you, what would be left? I've already lost 15 years to their lies. I won't lose the rest of my life to my own anger." They sat in silence for several minutes. The only sound, the crackling of the fire and distant drumming from the celebration outside. Finally, Nalnish spoke again. "Cochise thinks you're a spy. He believes the soldiers sent you to infiltrate our camp to learn our weaknesses. What do you think?" "I think," Nalnish paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think you are my sister, but I also think 15 years with the whites has changed you. The Apache way and the white way, they cannot coexist. You will have to choose which person you want to be." Ayanna felt the weight of that choice settling on her shoulders. "What if I choose to be both? What if I refuse to let anyone else define who I am? Then you will belong nowhere and to no one. Nalnish said sadly. The whites will never fully accept you if they know what you really are. And my people, they already whisper that you have been corrupted by white blood. Then maybe I need to prove them wrong. Maybe I need to show that being Apache isn't about the color of your skin or the language you speak. Maybe it's about the choices you make and the values you hold. Nalnish studied her for a long moment. Tomorrow the War Council meets again. Some of my warriors want to continue the raids to strike at the cavalry patrol that has been tracking us. Others want to test your loyalty by making you participate in an attack on white settlers. Ayana's blood ran cold. And what do you want? I want my sister back, Nalnish said simply. But I don't know if that's possible anymore. Too much has happened. Too much blood has been shed. We may have found each other too late. Outside, the celebration was winding down. The drumming had stopped, and she could hear families calling their children to bed. Soon the camp would be quiet except for the guards watching the approaches to their hidden stronghold. I need to ask you something, Ayana said quietly. The wagon train you attacked 3 days ago. My husband was among the dead. Nalnish's face went rigid. You were married to a white man? His name was James Mitchell. He was kind to me, loved me as best he could. He never knew who I really was, but he would have accepted it if I had told him. Ayana's voice grew stronger. When your warriors attacked, he died trying to protect me. He gave his life for someone he thought was just a white woman named Sarah. And you want me to feel guilt for his death? I want you to understand that not all whites are monsters. Some of them are just people trying to build lives, same as Apache families trying to survive. When you kill without choosing your targets, you become the very thing you claim to be fighting against. Nalnish was quiet for a long time, staring into the dying fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I don't know how to stop, sister. The hatred has been my strength for so long. I don't know who I would be without it. You would be my brother, Ayana said simply. The boy who carved me a wooden horse and promised to keep me safe. That person is still inside you, buried under all the pain and anger. Help me find him again. Nalnish looked at her with something that might have been hope. And if we can't? If the War Council decides tomorrow that you're a traitor who must die, Ayana touched the turquoise necklace at her throat, feeling the weight of her father's blessing and protection. Then I guess we'll find out what it really means to be Apache. Dawn came too soon. Ayana woke to the sound of warriors sharpening weapons and checking their horses, preparing for the War Council that would decide not only her fate, but potentially the future of everyone in the camp. She had slept little, her mind churning with memories both real and recovered, trying to understand who she was now that she knew the truth about her past. Ayana found her sitting outside her borrowed wickiup, watching the sunrise paint the canyon walls in shades of gold and red. You look like woman facing her own execution, he observed, settling beside her on the rocky ground. Maybe I am. Ayana pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Last night my brother told me I would have to choose between being Apache and being white. But what if I can't make that choice? What if both parts of me are equally real? Then you make third choice, Ayana said simply. You choose to be yourself, whatever that means. Before Ayana could respond, a young warrior approached them. The council calls for you, he said in accented English. Both of you. They followed him to the large wickiup where the War Council met. This time, the structure was packed with people. Not just the core group of warriors, but many of the women and older men who formed the backbone of the community. Ayana realized that whatever was decided here would affect everyone in the camp. Nalnish sat in the place of honor, his face a mask that revealed nothing of the internal struggle she had witnessed the night before. To his right sat Koshis, whose hostility toward her was clear in every line of his body. To his left sat an elderly woman with silver hair and knowing eyes, someone Ayana didn't recognize but who clearly held great influence in the community. Sit, Geronimo said, gesturing to a space in the circle directly across from Nalnish. Today we decide the truth. The elderly woman spoke first, her voice carrying the authority of age and wisdom. I am Ista, keeper of the old stories. I knew your parents, child. I was present when the sacred mark was burned into your flesh. Ayana's heart raced. Here was someone who could confirm or deny her identity beyond any doubt. Tell me, Ista continued. What do you remember of the ceremony? Ayana closed her eyes, reaching back into her earliest memories. Fire, she said slowly. Hot metal. Pain that felt like it would never end. But also, singing. Women's voices singing to keep the spirits with me. And after the pain, cool water. Gentle hands washing the burn. Someone, my mother I think, holding me while I cried. Ayana opened her eyes to find Ista watching her intently. She told me the mark would protect me always. That no matter where I went or what happened to me, the spirits would know I belonged to the Apache people. Ista nodded slowly. Your mother's words, exactly. And the song we sang, can you remember any of it? Ayana felt something stir in the deepest part of her memory. Without conscious thought, she began to hum a melody that seemed to come from her very bones. The tune was ancient, haunting, filled with the weight of generations. The effect on the gathering was immediate. Several of the older women gasped and one began to weep openly. Even Cochise looked shaken, his certainty wavering for the first time. That is the song of blessing, Ista said, her voice thick with emotion. It has been passed down from mother to daughter for countless generations. No white person could know that melody. Songs can be taught, Cochise said stubbornly, but his voice lacked conviction. Not this song, Ista replied firmly. This song is learned in the womb, passed through blood and spirit. If she knows it, she is one of us. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but not everyone was convinced. A younger warrior named Mako stood up, his face hard with suspicion. Even if she is Apache by blood, she has been corrupted by white ways, he declared. She speaks their language better than ours. She thinks like them, feels like them. How do we know she won't betray us to the soldiers? Because I'm here by choice, Ayana said, rising to face her accuser. I could have gone to Fort Apache, could have continued living as a white woman. Instead, I chose to seek out my people, to try to understand who I really am. Pretty words. Mako sneered. But words are cheap. If you truly wish to be Apache again, prove it. Join our next raid. Kill whites with your own hands. Show us that your loyalty is to your blood family, not to the people who stole you. A chill ran through the gathering. This was the test Ayana had been dreading, the demand that she prove her Apache identity by committing violence against innocent people. No, she said quietly, but her voice carried clearly through the wiki-up. Angry shouts erupted from several quarters. You see? Mako cried triumphantly. She refuses to fight our enemies. She is white in her heart. She is wise in her heart, Geronimo interjected, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. The child refuses to kill innocents. This shows honor, not cowardice. Honor? Koshi stood up, his scarred face twisted with anger. Where was Apache honor when white soldiers butchered our children? Where was white honor when they drove us from our lands? This woman speaks of peace while our people die on reservations. The argument that followed was fierce and chaotic, with various faction leaders shouting over each other in Apache and English. Ayana watched her brother throughout the debate, trying to read his expression. He had said nothing so far, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. Finally, Nalnish raised his hand for silence. The wiki-up fell quiet except for the crackling of the central fire. My sister, he said, his eyes finding hers across the circle. Yesterday you told me that being Apache is about the choices we make and the values we hold. What choice do you make now? Ayana stood slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze in the wiki-up. This was the moment that would define not only her own future, but potentially the fate of everyone in this hidden camp. I choose to be Apache, she said clearly, but I also choose to remember what being Apache truly means. Our ancestors were not mindless killers. They were protectors, providers, people who fought only when they had to and who valued wisdom over revenge. She turned to address the entire gathering. You ask me to prove my loyalty by killing innocents. But that's not the Apache way, that's the white way. The way of people who kill anyone different from themselves. You've become so focused on fighting your enemies that you've started acting like them. Angry voices began to rise again, but Ayana continued speaking over them. I've lived in both worlds now. I've seen the worst of white society. The hatred, the ignorance, the willingness to destroy anything they don't understand. But I've also seen their capacity for love, for growth, for change, just as I've seen Apache warriors capable of great honor and terrible cruelty. She looked directly at her brother. 15 years ago, soldiers attacked our camp and scattered our family. That was a crime that deserved justice. But justice is not the same as revenge. Justice would have been stopping those soldiers, protecting our people, finding ways to ensure such attacks never happened again. Revenge is what you've been doing. killing anyone with white skin regardless of their guilt or innocence. And what would you have us do? Cochise demanded. Surrender? Accept the reservations? Watch our culture die slowly instead of fighting for it? I would have you be smarter than your enemies, Ayanna replied. Fight the system, not the people trapped in it. Find allies among the whites who oppose what was done to you. Use their own laws and values against them. Show the world that Apache people are not the savages they've been painted as. Impossible, Mako scoffed. Whites will never see us as equals. Some won't, Ayanna agreed. But some will. I lived among them for 15 years. I know there are white people who believe in justice, who would support Apache rights if they understood the truth about what happened here. She paused, looking around the circle at faces that showed varying degrees of skepticism, anger, and hope. The war you've been fighting is one you cannot win, she continued, not because you lack courage or skill, but because you're fighting the wrong enemy. The real enemy isn't white skin. It's the ideas that make people think they have the right to steal children, destroy families, erase cultures. Those ideas can only be defeated by better ideas, not by bullets. Nalnish was studying her intently. And you believe you can spread these better ideas? I believe we can try, together. Ayanna's voice grew stronger. I know both worlds now. I can speak to whites in ways that might make them listen, but I need my Apache family to teach me the old ways I've forgotten, to help me understand what it truly means to be one of your people. The elderly woman, Ista, spoke into the silence that followed. In the old days, when our people faced a crisis too large for war to solve, we would seek a different path. We would send those who could walk between worlds to find solutions that honored all life. She stood slowly, her ancient joints protesting. I believe the spirits brought this child back to us for a reason, not to kill for us, but to speak for us, not to continue the war, but to find a way to end it with honor. The debate that followed went on for hours. Voices were raised, old grievances aired, fears and hopes expressed with passionate intensity, but gradually Ayanna could see opinions beginning to shift. The older members of the community, those who remembered the time before the wars began, seemed increasingly willing to consider alternatives to endless violence. The younger warriors remained skeptical, but even they could not argue with the stark reality of their situation. Their numbers were dwindling, their supplies running low, their safe havens fewer each year. The path they had been following led only to extinction. Finally, as the sun reached its peak overhead, Nalnish called for a final vote. One by one, the council members spoke their decisions. Some voted to continue the raids, to test Ayanna's loyalty through violence. Others voted to try her proposed path of negotiation and alliance building. When the last voice had been heard, the count was close, but the advocates for a new approach had prevailed by a narrow margin. It is decided, Nalnish announced. We will attempt to contact sympathetic whites to find those who might help us negotiate fair treatment from the government. My sister will serve as our voice in this effort. Cochise stood up abruptly. And if this fails? If the whites betray us as they have before? Nalnish met his lieutenant's eyes steadily. Then we will face that choice when it comes. But for now, we try a different way. The council dispersed slowly, with many members still grumbling about the decision. Ayanna remained in her place, emotionally exhausted by the intensity of the debate and the weight of responsibility now resting on her shoulders. Ayanna approached her as the wiki-up emptied. Heavy burden for someone who just remembered she was Apache, he observed. Maybe that's why I can carry it, Ayanna replied. I don't have 15 years of hatred weighing me down. Nalnish was the last to leave, stopping beside her as he headed for the exit. Sister, he said quietly, I hope you understand what you have committed to. If this path fails, if people die because we tried talking instead of fighting, that blood will be on both our hands. Ayanna met his eyes steadily. And if we had continued on the old path, how much more blood would have been spilled? At least this way we're choosing hope over despair. Nalnish nodded slowly. Then we go forward together. Apache and white, brother and sister, trying to find a bridge between two worlds that have been at war too long. As he walked away, Ayanna touched the turquoise necklace at her throat and whispered a prayer to the spirits of her ancestors. She had found her family and her identity, but the real challenge was just beginning. Now she had to prove that love could be stronger than hatred, that understanding could triumph over ignorance, and that people from different worlds could find ways to live in peace. The desert wind carried her words away into the vast sky, where eagles soared between earth and heaven, bridging the space between two worlds with the grace of their flight.